welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ari Daramy, and here co-hosting with me for the first time in 2025, Mahmoud Mboj. Welcome to the program.
Absolutely, it appears so, yeah.
Yes, indeed. Last week we had Usman Jatta, and the week before we had The Year in Review.
Exactly.
And doing the signing for us, we have Lamin D. Sonko. And anybody joining us for the first time wondering why is it called The Week in Review? Well, guess why? It's got 10 big stories from the week just gone by, and we review them in some details, and some stories demand more of our time and attention than others. And so if you think we're spending too much on a story, chill. It's meant to be like that, okay? So you're probably wondering what's on the menu. Well, Ghana's President Mahama, just days after his inauguration, made his first state visit. Where did he visit? He visited the Gambia. And also this week we had the 8th Stake in the Nation Forum, which looks at diaspora engagement with the Gambia. Also, President Barrow, he did his recent Meet the People tour, but there were some places and some projects he didn't get to visit. So this week he went and he had a look. In some cases he wasn't that pleased with what he saw. Also, this week he was able to present to the Gambia Armed Forces 17 armored personnel carriers procured from Turkey. Also, we have a look at fostering Gambia-China relations, particularly for journalists. And 82 years ago, on 13th of January, there was a very important visit by an American president to the Gambia, yes, Franklin D. Roosevelt. So these are some of the stories on this week's program. So let's get things up and running, shall we? Ghana's president, John Dramani Mahama, made his first state visit to a fellow West African country, and that country was the Gambia. Here's a look, here's a listen.
Bilateral relations highlighting opportunities for collaboration in sectors such as agriculture, trade, education, amongst other key sectors of cooperation. Shortly after this, both leaders took questions from the press.
We are honored for the resounding victory. Congratulate you for your resilience and your courage. And as I said, there is no school for experience. You are former president and you are now president. So we have no doubt that you will continue the leadership and you will continue where you stop.
Discussed issues Ghana gives its support.
There we heard the two leaders there just saying a few words to the media. Mahama was a very busy man. On Tuesday, he got back into his office, as in physically into his office, and he set off straight away meeting loads and loads of people. And when he left the Gambia, he went to Senegal and met Diomaye Faye. But pride of place, Mr. Mboj, for his first visit was, as I mentioned, the Gambia. So quite a coup for us. Pardon the mention of coup in this West Africa.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how they will take that pun. I'm not sure. Right. Yes, so for me, it makes me wonder, what is he up to?
Sort of with these visits.
All these visits and the like. Of course, taking over at a time when analysts tell us that the country is facing its worst economic crisis in a generation.
This is
a massive, massive problem. So right now, so when it comes to foreign policy, maybe with us, I would have thought that, well, we still have Ghanaian soldiers in here.
Well, this is true,
That's one of them. And recently there was this Ghana Town issue, and I'm sure Jammeh prosecutions, I think one of the questions there was about reparations.
That's correct. And
you know, that sort of thing. So I would have thought that this would be the topics for discussion, really. And economic for how long now? You know, I'm sure they will also throw in their weight because they have some of their soldiers in there.
And this is somebody who's had engagements, of course, with the Gambia. 2016, he was here when there was the impasse. And then in 2021, he came here as an election observer. So very much. But some of the Ghanaian papers are interpreting his visit to the Gambia and to Senegal as strengthening ties in a couple of instances. One to do with possible opening up trade between his country and those respective countries, because, as you said, you know, there's a kind of economic crisis that he's dealing with there. And the other one, of course, is the Sahel, this whole, we've had the breakaway from, the Alliance of Sahelian States. And now Togo, just before I came on this program, is threatening that it might join those states. So that Ford Nyasingbe said he might join them. So they said, in the Ghanaian papers, they were interpreting it, he's trying to kind of bolster and possibly take the lead. I mean, Tinubu's kind of taken the lead somewhat, but this guy, and interestingly, just quickly mentioned Tinubu, when Mahama introduced him at the inauguration, he said, I would like to welcome Bola Tinubu, the president of Ghana, which drew laughs and from everybody. Then he corrected himself and said, of the Republic of Nigeria. But there's been this sense that perhaps he wants to have a more active role than did Akufo-Addo in kind of reaching out to, fellow ECOWAS states.
Absolutely, and he said it, the security aspect, that's huge, and the trade bit. So this is really my thing. Afterwards, I thought, now how these bilateral agreements look vis-a-vis the ECOWAS plan, with
free
their space, free movement of goods and people and stuff like that.
But we don't do it.
That's it. I would have thought that particularly amongst ourselves, we'll be doing our politics, as it were, through the body ECOWAS, especially when it comes to agreements and that sort of thing, just to align with the plan. And how does that align with AFTA? He mentioned that as well, quite. The free trade, the continental trade area. So this is it. Yes, there's obviously some urgency, the fact that he's making these trips around, then yes, taking that leadership role. So we'll see where he goes from there. There our president said that hopefully he would continue from when he left off, and I thought, I don't think Ghanaians would want that. They would want him to take a turn. They want to break from that, because he wasn't full of glory when he left. That was why Addo won. Addo won. So perhaps he's had a good rethink, as it were, over these 4 or 5 years. And then he sort of hit the ground running. Got a plan in place, knows exactly what to do.
But of course, Africans being Africans, the third angle I should have mentioned that Ghanaians took was like, why is he traveling already? We tend to criticize our presidents for their kind of endless travel, or so it seems. But again, as we mentioned, the other two aspects, the security and also the trade, there's a reason why you would want to go and speak to your, I guess, brother presidents, or men in this region, and see whether you can strengthen those ties.
That's it. And our cynicism, we see these politicians as just sort of like pigging out on the perks, traveling per diems, money, wasting our money. But, in our more sober moments, you know that they have to make
There's a reason for many of these trips.
For these. It's just now this sour relationship between the rulers and the ruled. So whatever move they take, we interpret, a good chunk of us, especially on social media.
Quite.
So this is really what the problem is. But we understand that they need to travel. They say stuff like that about our president here as well, whenever he travels. So it's just this relationship now between the ruler and the ruled that is making it difficult. There's no trust. It's a breakdown of trust in many ways. So that's really a huge problem.
It's a massive one. But Mahama, we'll wait and see, because great expectations indeed. But thank you for that, Mr. Ambuch. Thank you. Story number 2. Recently, there was the 8th Stake in the Nation Forum. This is a forum that looks at kind of diaspora engagement with the home country, i.e. in this case, the Gambia. And here's some of what was revealed.
Gambia received over $775.6 million in remittances. $775.6 million in remittances, reflecting a significant increase of 28.8 million over the prior year. The funds are used predominantly for consumption, education, healthcare, and small-scale investment financing, thereby fostering development of both the household.
We heard there a clip. I had chosen another clip, but it doesn't seem to have come. Mr. Ambuch, we have this every year, and we look at it, 775.6 million, and that's in a year, and it's an astonishing figure. And that figure, we always have to remind people, is just the remittances sent by what we would call official sources. So the banks, the remittance, Western Union, and that sort of thing. But this year they tried to kind of broaden it and say, look, we've heard some of the things that it's spent on. Why not think about remitting to create jobs, to create investment? And that's really been something that I know Professor Fowle, Jibril Fowle, who's kind of instigator of this, is something he's been kind of harping on about for many years. We haven't quite cracked it yet, have we?
That's it. That is the key, especially there. I think we heard from Mamadou Ndiaye of the Central Bank.
Central Bank. Yep.
That's it, what the funds are sort of predominantly spent on.
Rent, school fees, just daily living.
And small scale investments. Then when you compare to other countries, for instance, in Rwanda, they've got all sorts of funds, investing in
including a diaspora fund. There was a bond which helped to build housing for civil servants.
Absolutely.
That was fully funded by Rwanda diaspora bond. Yeah.
Exactly, stuff like that. So I think when we interviewed, we spoke to Jibril Fowle.
Yeah, correct.
And
in fact, he was involved in the Rwanda one, by the way.
Okay, so very interesting. So this is that's just the idea to just go beyond the remittances sent that will spend mainly consuming or in health and all of that, but then be investing them.
Yeah,
I think that's really the next shift.
Well,
and no wonder the theme this year was a diaspora jobs and financing development.
Well, this is it, and that's what we're trying to do, because most of the development that's funded by diaspora money tends to be house building. If it goes beyond the small ones where we're talking about rent, maybe school fees and books and so on, and just kind of day-to-day living, it tends to be in house building. People send money to family to say, build me a house or whatever. But like creating kind of real jobs, this is the one we've not really, as I say, we haven't quite cracked yet, and we're still working at it, really.
And this is in many ways where the government must take the lead. Hence, I think the partnership with GK Partners, so that we know how to do it. In fact, when I interviewed them, he and
Chukwuemeka Chikezi.
Exactly. I said, how much or the politics of the home country, how much of that influences decisions taken outside, the cohesiveness of the diaspora. And Chukwu said that, yes, that's really very important. So how can government, if you like, come up with a kind of policy, with a kind of package that would make the whole thing look autonomous and independent, so that people of all political persuasion all can feel being part of it. So that sense of ownership, the sense of creating that cohesion in the diaspora, I think that is so significant. So you just hope that the internal politics wouldn't sort of vitiate that.
And that's what it tends to do. And the reason I'm kind of smiling as you're mentioning this is because 10 or 12 years ago, even longer, 2007 actually, so 17 years ago, we tried something like this in Sierra Leone, and the proposal we put forward was that, look, we all belong to different political parties, but we all complain about the same things. The hospitals that we used to go to, they're now run down. The schools that we attended, many of them are run down. Why don't we have a kind of diaspora fund that we can all contribute to, and that fund, we do a list of 10 big projects that we're always complaining about. We do a survey, and what are the top 10? And that fund goes towards those projects. But it never took off because people did not trust each other. And they would say that, well, if, imagine you've got 2 or 3 or 4 million, people will be tempted to steal from it. So I'm not going to contribute to a fund like that. So we want it, but we don't want to contribute to it. So it's a kind of, catch-22.
Yes, it's the lack of trust.
That's as
we mentioned before. And still the Rwanda example, we keep giving Rwanda as an example, but again, they're doing a lot of things right. A recent survey of Rwandan professionals, in the UK, a third of the respondents said that they'd invested in some form of business in the country. So there has to be that institutional efficiency, which would encourage trust, and then the leadership, as it were. So there are a few things that we must do as a nation, I think, so that we can really benefit from all the potential.
Because
there's so much potential with the diaspora.
Because I keep mentioning the official figures, and if you, just kind of conservatively, imagine the kind of unofficial, we're talking about $1 billion coming into the country. We don't get that in all the aid combined
at all.
in any particularly $1 billion. So it's a lot of money, and we really could use it to be kind of transformational, but we're not being able to do so. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another aspect that we tend to ignore, the skills transfer.
Yeah, quite.
The potential really for the
Sure.
diaspora to come back here in certain technical areas,
Yeah, sure.
as it were. So we need to explore that as well.
Sure.
So this is what I mean. The potential is really massive.
Sure.
Just depends on how we tap into it, how we harness it.
Sure.
It's all there. So hopefully with this partnership with GK Partners,
And
as
the
you said, that
yeah.
they had been involved in the Rwanda one, and that
yeah.
example we've seen
That's
how
right.
well really it's working,
Yeah, sure.
then can we replicate something similar in here?
Yeah, we hope so. We hope so. And so, yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. On to story number 3. And I mentioned at the top of the show that His Excellency the President went on his Meet the People tour towards the end of the year. And he saw lots of projects that are being undertaken. And so more recently, some of the projects he was not able to visit, he decided to visit. He wasn't entirely pleased with what he saw. Have a look, have a listen.
Definitely, to be very honest, when I was in my office, there was something in my head. There was a picture. Definitely that picture is not on the ground because of the target time that we have for these projects. The projects is way behind schedule because we targeted this project to be part of our independence celebration. It is far behind schedule, but we have discussed with the contractor and the consultant. They will give us a realistic, revised work plan. And we will receive this on Friday. We will discuss with them to see what will be the realistic time.
Realistic time, Mr. Mboch. It would therefore appear that these companies that won these projects must have heard that we would like to get this done in time for the Diamond Jubilee, and they said, yes, we can. But when you look at the projects, not only are they behind schedule, they are way behind schedule. I guess depending on the contract, we haven't seen it. Freedom of information might help us see it. Access to information. Usually there are penalties if you fail to meet this sort of thing. So you either penalize them financially or they work beyond, obviously, the contracted period because they're the ones who haven't met it. So not very good. And when he went to one of the project sites, there was a kind of mini strike. Workers had downed tools. My colleagues told me that most of the workers who had downed tools were Sierra Leoneans. They were the laborers on the site, and the president, in fact, had to mediate and intervene. So obviously there are problems, and you know, as I said, these are the kind of things that he didn't get to visit when he did the Meet the People tour.
Absolutely, and it was quite fascinating, the picture he had in his head. How did he form that picture in his head? Was it what the officials responsible were putting in there? They were presenting to him. So, you know, those people may have one or two things to answer, if that is the case. And this is it. You see, when I hear, for instance, our president sort of talking like that, it inspires confidence in many ways, you know what I mean? We know the general tempo, the temper of how we do things, really. If you want things get done and get done on time, we all know that the boss, the person we call the boss, the supervisor, must be constantly on people,
cracking the
whip all the time. You know how difficult things can be. So this is it. He's seen for himself. And one would hope that sort of taking lessons, as it were, for even other areas.
Well,
you just never know. Yeah. Sometimes through a window, you can see a whole vista, as it were, of things. Then you can take care of
And when we were in the office and we were watching that, somebody said to me, oh, he needed to show anger. I said, well, no, it's in the words. His disappointment is there. It's clear to see. And the fact that he's telling us they're going to come in and we're going to discuss this tells you that he's trying to get this moving, and he's trying to get things. He doesn't have to scream and shout and put on a show. that's just for, that's just childish. And so, but you can tell his anger. And he said, starts by saying, to be honest, I'm disappointed. And then he goes on to tell us why he's disappointed. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be kind of a circus, really.
Absolutely, it doesn't. In fact, how you demonstrate your leadership is really when things are going bad. Things are going badly.
Sure.
That's really where you should be cool and calm. So that's how it is. You don't need to be sort
because
of barking.
There might be mitigating circumstances. So you call them in and you say, why is it late? Not,
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And if you had been getting regular feedback, see, one would have seen perhaps this coming.
Well, this
isn't
is it.
it?
And
So
the disappointment would have been less.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I'm not sure whether we're going to do the story about the visit to Kanilai, the Kanilai ferry.
No, it was part of. It was
part of
that.
That's it. When he said that we're going to order new ferries and all of that. I said, yes, Mr. President. But again, we must also insist on good management.
Yeah, quite.
You see, this is really what has been a problem in many ways. Good management so that whatever we have will last long.
Sure.
Bad management would cut that short,
Yeah.
the utility, as it were, cut it short and then it will be expensive. So that is so important as well. Possibly some might say that it's because of bad management this time that they haven't really met their deadline, really. So there could be all sorts of reasons, but there are connections there to my mind.
Sure.
Having resources, the tools, that's one thing.
Sure.
Having the right people to manage it, that's also quite another. And we're beginning to see that perhaps in that department, we need to do that. Something needs
lacking.
to be done.
We need to build capacity there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. Story number 4, a very different story. For quite a long time, we've been talking about implementing a language in education policy. I ask, what's being done about it? Well, now it seems as if they are about to get it up and running. And this clip might surprise you as it did me. Have a look, have a listen.
What is happening in the Gambia right now in terms of language of education, language of instruction, and policy development is very unusual, certainly in Africa. I've worked in language policy areas in Kenya, in Cameroon, in Ghana, in South Africa, and I think this is the place where I see people not just looking at the policy, because anyone can write a policy, and you just put it in and there it is, but to say, all right, now what will we do?
Not just looking at the policy, what can we do? Mr. Mboch, I must admit, when she said that, she named all those countries, and she said Gambia was the one country where they weren't just looking at the policy. That wasn't the sense I got. I thought that, yet again, we'd had another nice paper. And I did some digging as to how long that we'd been kind of looking at this. And I found a paper from 1996 by Ali Mazrui, looking at the Gambia, no less, in which he said that, it had been decided at sort of cabinet level that the 3 languages of instruction would be English, French, and Wolof. But it never happened. And now we've had another rethink, another look, and we now have this policy which, as we are now being told, has gone beyond the looking and validation stage. We're now at the cusp of the implementation stage.
Absolutely. Barbara Trandell, I got her name because what she said sort of stood out. And she went on there to say, if it matters enough to write a policy, it should matter enough to make it happen. And that is the key. Anybody can write a policy. How many times have we said that here? And we have lots of policies.
Till we become blasé about policies and validation.
That's it. So, yes, so what next? Fantastic. On this morning, the other day, we spoke to the director of curriculum, Mamadou Dieng.
That's right.
And yes, they were going into the standardization as well, because I asked him about that. So there are many phases. So I think this is what Barbara Trandell was referring to, that beyond the policy, now we're active, we're delivering. So what do we deliver next? So now they're going to go into the standardization and all the rest of it. But in our story as well, one of the officials we interviewed said, it's not just in language, one language, it's in all of them.
Yeah, go on.
Then I was thinking, ooh, how feasible is that?
Well, when that person said that, that took me to the problem that they had in Nigeria, because they have 250 languages, and there's no way. And that's why they've kind of stuck just to English, because you'd never get agreement with 250 languages. And you think, well, that is the fact. You can go online and you can check, because as I said, I found the Ali Mazrui one to do with the Gambia, and I found several papers to do with Nigeria and why there hadn't been that kind of thing in Nigeria. So what you have in the north, you have now English and Arabic mainly. But again, we've seen how we're trying to get the madrasas to kind of be included in the kind of general curriculum, so that when people get to a certain age, they're not stranded when it comes to job opportunities.
Absolutely, and normally when you have these policies, it's often what 3, 4 languages,
that's
2,
right.
3, stuff like that, manageable numbers.
Quite.
I'm not sure I understand why they'll go for all of it being politically correct, but sometimes you need to take tough political decisions. So whether they'll have the courage, you see, that's why you can't be a leader if you're not courageous sometimes to do certain things. How viable would it be? How long then would it take? Where would they begin? Would they have to wait for all of them to be done? Standardization in all these different languages.
If you think about it, all these languages and all the kind of textbooks and the teaching and the instruction,
teachers, the expertise,
and training the teachers, because you and I know that we can have a conversation in any language, English, Wolof, Mandinka, Fula, but teaching in that language is not the same as just being able to kind of have the conversational skills. So there's a whole raft of things. That's why I was surprised that we were talking as if we were on the cusp of implementing this, because from what I see and know, I think we're a long way from it.
Yes, I think we're a long way as well. And possibly when we begin, we're not going to begin with all of them, but maybe pilot a few.
Yeah, and then the arguments will start.
Then the arguments
why those ones? Why not this one?
Why not this one? That sort of thing. Sure. So this is why government was always come with this sort of rational policies, so that you can explain to people why you've done A, B, C, and D, stuff like that. And then hopefully in the longer term, this can only be a long-term kind of project, isn't it, really? So we'll just sort of bite-sized chunk, just take as much as you can handle, and then one step at a time you'll get there.
This is it, as they say, how do you eat an elephant?
That's
one chunk at a time.
Chunk at a time.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Thank you. Story number 5, which will also take us to the midway point in terms of stories. President Barrow recently presented some armored personnel carriers that we got from Turkey to the Gambia Armed Forces. Why do we need them, I hear you ask? This clip might tell you.
These state-of-the-art vehicles, designed to provide enhanced protection and mobility, will serve as a strong enhancement of the Gambia Armed Forces' operational readiness. With their deployment, the Gambia Armed Forces is now positioned to meet the stringent requirements of any future UN peacekeeping mission that we are invited to partake. The APCs will also bolster our capacity to respond to domestic security challenges.
Domestic security challenges as well as UN peacekeeping missions. We've been on a few of those, Mr. Mboj, and we've never had armored personnel carriers, so I'm not sure it's harmed that at all. But it's been a big talking point, particularly on social media, as you were saying in another context. People are saying, why do we need them? Why must we have them? But, both for external and internal security, I guess.
Absolutely, and there, when he mentioned the UN peacekeeping mission before talking about the domestic security, that really gave the game away. One would have thought that our domestic security would be number one priority, and then everything else is secondary, quite obviously. So that's it. When you look at our situation right now, perhaps we do not know the security threats that we face. Perhaps they do know, but it hasn't filtered to us, certainly. Right. We've been on a security sector reform for a very, very long time. The reason why ECOMIC is still here is because of that. So now they've given us this, 17. Of course, some people will ask, is that really what our priorities are right now? What kind of internal security are we facing right now? When it comes to external threats, oh, for God's sake, we are entirely surrounded by Senegal. Somebody will have to come through.
So it's either Senegal or somebody has to come through Senegal.
So I do not see really, in that sense, any external, as it were, security threat. Everything will be from within, be it from maybe organized crime with drug dealers. You know, such possibilities could arise, granted. But inside, I really do not get the sense that one needs all of these things at this point. Maybe they have access to information that we don't.
Well, I was going to say something similar. Then I remembered that upwards of 10, maybe 20 people attacked the petrol station at Farafenni, opened fire, and were it not that they were armed guards, it could have been very, very serious. They escaped with nothing, escaped with their lives, but you know, that was quite a serious one, and it is alleged that they fled back over the border. So perhaps, you know, these are the sorts of things that we have to deal with.
Yes, until we know actually what actually happened.
Of course we don't.
How big was the group, you know, to pose such a threat, or was it just one or two adventurers, as it were? So we need to get the details so we can assess, as it were, the seriousness of the threat we face.
And I suspect the authorities will say that these are part of the very security sector reform that we're talking about. You know, tooling up our people for the, you know, expect the unexpected. Don't wait till it happens before you tool up.
Absolutely. But if that is the case, you know that the armored vehicles, as it were, that's just one aspect of it. There are many pillars, you know, really to securing your borders, as it were. So if we do not get those things right, I'm not sure whether just the armored vehicles will help. So these multidimensional things, let us be careful not to sort of confuse what, as they say, necessity with sufficiency.
Exactly. A brilliant point to put a full stop on the first part of the program. We'll go for a commercial break, and after the break we will have 5 more stories. Don't go away. Join us after the break.
Yako lache QCell jox la ko yokkute am na ci suñ promo bu bees bi di suñu bundle mega promo léegi mun nga dugga ci internet bi ci noo ko buggee ak num gën a yombee jëndal suñ data bundle package boo bugga te nga am ci wàññite bu mag dialal star 303# pour nga mun a jëfandikoo internet bi ci network bu gën a yaatu jëndal 20 megabytes data bundle léegi ci juróom-ñaari dërëm ak genn wàlla bu dul loolu nga jënda biga bundle lu dem ba 20 gigabytes waaw dégg nga ma 20 gigabytes data bundle ak suñ mega promo bundles bi mun nga jëfandikoo internet bi waxtaan ci lu yàgga ñu jokkale la saa su ne fu ne pour am ci lu leer mun nga call QCell customer care ci 111 QCell ñoo xaali yoon bi ñeneen toppa lii dafa ànd ak sarta yuñ tëral.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching QTV and you are still watching the Week in Review, and I'm still Adi Darami, and across the table from me there is still Mamadou Mbodj and there is still Lamindi Sonko doing the signing. Anybody just joining us now, I'm sure you've got a very good reason or excuse for doing so. Who knows, you might have been watching football on TV or something. But 5 more stories, and of course you missed 5 good ones, but as you'll see from story number 6 and the others, some very good stories still to come. Now, our colleague Jennifer Sonko recently returned from 4 months in China, and she learned a lot while she was there. And so much so that she decided to do something that none of the others who had gone and had studied in China for up to 10 months had done. She organized a China-Gambia Bantaba, where she brought together some of the alumni who had been to study in China. Here's some of what she had to say.
I've learned a lot. I've improved both professionally and personally. And when I was young, growing up in Gambia here, I did not have the opportunity to have direct interface with my role models. So I felt like there's an alumni in the Gambia, including myself and other colleagues. We should come together and meet high school students and tell them about our experience so that they'll be motivated to also seek developmental opportunities such as the CIPCC.
Jennifer Sonko there, and I can hear all of you saying, what does she mean when I was young? I didn't know Jennifer Sonko was old, but we know what she's getting at, Mr. Mboj. But one of the things that we saw and heard from Jennifer and our former colleague Choi, who had gone, was her predecessor in terms of going from QTB to China, was that they came back enthused and kind of full of beans and really inspired by what they had seen and heard in their many months in China.
Oh, absolutely. All of them sort of spoke about the discipline and the infrastructure, extraordinary stuff that they saw, and the work ethic.
Work ethic kept coming up time and time again.
Time and time again. So now, in many ways, China is all the rage now, isn't it? With the decline of the West. People of our generation, for us, it was Britain or America, that sort of thing. So there's a new kid on the block, as it were, these days. And yes, it will be interesting to explore ideas, as it were, isn't it? To see how they have done it. But we must not do it, you know, with our eyes closed.
Yeah, quite, exactly.
There are certain things that we wouldn't want. For instance, we wouldn't want one party to be in control. We want multi-party democracy. They have a different
system that works for them.
And we all know the relationship between media and the political system in place. For our political system, we follow the watchdog model of media.
Indeed.
Some years ago, I read into these things with the Chinese idea of constructive. It's a very interesting concept. You're not simply being a watchdog, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong. Can you be part of the debate and make positive suggestions and that sort of thing? I don't mind that at all. But in our system, the watchdog role is so important.
Indeed.
We need to give people the accurate information, perhaps on the basis of which they will go and vote. See, this is how it works with us. So they are all interlinked. So let us be careful what we are learning. Let us be careful in which areas can we collaborate. There are the potential there is massive, but again the dangers, the pitfalls.
Because I routinely hear people saying, oh, if only we could be like China. It's a different system.
It's a different culture, society. Read into their society and see. Just they can read 100 years of their history and see how it has.
And a point I always make, and I made to Choi and I made to Jennifer Sonko, I'm old enough to have remembered when, if you had told me that China would be where it is today, 50 or 60 years ago, myself and everybody with me would have laughed. And that has been the astonishing change that has been wrought in China. It's nothing short of, no other country has achieved it in human history, that kind of transformation. And so just because they can do it doesn't mean that you can transplant it somewhere else.
Absolutely. There was something there.
Quite.
Then, what, late 70s, wasn't it 78?
That's
Deng
Xiaoping.
With that new idea, that swerve, that significant swerve, as it were, experimenting with ideas. You see? So there's a way that we can study their history and learn how they did it. As it were, that experimental stuff, never mind the ideology. That was very interesting. So it teaches you leadership. This is what we were talking about earlier, that leaders must have courage. You get a vision and you must have courage. Sometimes you may do something that your people do not want you to do at the time,
But in time,
give it time, you know, they will look back and say, oh,
Yeah,
that was a good thing. We're glad that our president
Yeah, sure.
went against our wishes and did this for us. Sometimes with the group, we are driven more by emotion than by thought.
because if you had said to somebody 1965, 67, 68, when myself and everybody had a copy of Chairman Mao's Red Book, if you had said to them that there will be Chinese millionaires or billionaires in the People's Republic of China,
Absolutely.
you would have been laughed at.
They would have been laughed at, exactly.
And yet that is the
Look
reality.
at it.
China has more billionaires than America.
Exactly, to them. So
you know,
this is it. So there are lessons that we can learn definitely.
Sure.
And the help they've been giving us, it's been such a long time. They built our stadium,
Yeah,
for
quite,
God's sake.
quite.
So we're
Conference
used to
center.
seeing, we are used to seeing the
Yeah.
Chinese ever since I was younger, you know what I mean, in one form or one
yeah.
other. That relationship, we've had good relationship. We remember when our president went to visit China, and I think he did, 2 or 3 times, something like that.
Indeed, yeah.
So we've always had this relationship, good relationship. It's just that now, this is 2024.
Sure.
Something else has
2025.
emerged. 2025, you see, 1 year behind. That's it. Now we're beginning to see this sort of superpower rivalry again in a way that we didn't. It wasn't China then. Then it was the Soviet Union.
Sure.
So now how is it going to play out this time? So we must be alert to the reality of today.
Sure.
There's a new superpower rivalry.
Yeah.
How do we play our hand?
Indeed. Thank you for that, Mr. Umberge. How do we play our hand? Indeed. Thank you for that. Story number 7. Those of you who have been in the Gambia or have visited the Gambia have probably heard of Operation Clear the Road. It's been ongoing, and they've now decided that it's reaching a crucial and decisive stage. What's crucial and decisive about it? This might tell you.
As with previous phases of the operation, vendors were reminded not to block public spaces or obstruct traffic flow. PRO Sisao expressed satisfaction with a high level of public compliance during the operation.
When we got to Bakotes around the station, coming to the market, and we've seen that the space or the highway has been, people have moved away from the highway. And that's a good thing. That's what we want, to collaborate and work together. It means that the effort has been recognized. It means that the press release yesterday that have been sent was recognized. And this is what we want to encourage everybody. When we got to this station where we are around the market, we found women who, where they were given, they actually are adhering.
People were adhering to where they were. And now I don't know whether my colleague who edited that story deliberately did it, because just before PRO Sisao spoke about compliance, he told me, and we saw it there, that as they saw the police approaching, that's when people started gathering up their stuff and running out of, where they had been told not to. So I'm not sure that counts as compliance. But Modu Musa Sisao there, the PRO, seemed very pleased to say that, he was encouraged by the level of compliance that they were getting from the public.
It's too early to tell. You need them to comply for sustainable periods for us to know that it's actually working. Just as you said, this is what they do when they see the police, the authorities coming. They just gather up and leave. So this is it. It's been 1 year. Still, they find that they're having to go back and ask people to leave.
And go back to places. They're not going to new places. They're going to places they had visited and cleared before.
So how are we handling this? People who sort of return, who flout the regulations, we just ask you to go. There's nothing else going to happen, there's some prosecution or anything. We are not the law.
The law doesn't allow us to find them.
That's it. We're not going to find them.
We're
not going to do anything. So it's just like a game of cat and mouse. So for how long can the police keep on doing this?
And when you kind of, as you've said many times, appealing to people's good nature is never going to work. You have to be forceful and you have to enforce. And unless you enforce with some amount of strictures, then, cat and mouse is what we'll be playing.
That's what we've seen in nation building. It's really when the institutions work, then when people have to deal with them, you modify your conduct. That's where you help people to change, modify their conducts, really, things. Otherwise, they'll do what they think is in their interest. The institutions are not working. Sort of the culture of impunity, you see it all over the place, at every level in many ways. I drive the way I like. Sometimes I stop where I shouldn't because nothing will come out of it.
I stop and I put down passengers at a zebra crossing.
It, nothing will
and
come
there's a
out
policeman
of it.
there, and he doesn't even stop me.
Yeah, so generally, this is what is. So, to my mind, it's a bit too early to tell whether it has been successful.
Sure.
They've done it for 1 year now. For how long more? The institutional framework we have in place to implement, is it sound? I keep on saying it because you know that with such regulation, really, it is easier for local government, what level local government, for them to implement
than
the central authority. Can you be everywhere at the same time?
No.
It's only local government that's everywhere at the same time. You know what I mean? So each you have your little patch of enforcement.
And you regulate
that patch. So it's easier. Earlier on we talked about the bite-sized chunks. That's really where you cut these problems down to size, then it's implementable.
Because we talk casually about decentralization. But this is the very model of not decentralizing, by what we've seen and what we've observed.
Absolutely.
And heard, right?
And we've long sort of followed democracies to see really how they work, really. If you want sort of your national policies to really trickle down to everybody, you go through local government.
Sure.
So you see lots of central governments, you will reform local government, but because you want to make it work. You see, they will never abolish it. If we could, I think we would. There's this tension, as it were, between central government and local government. That is not good for a democracy. It's not going to work. It's a lose-lose situation. We like talking about win-win situation. This one is a lose-lose situation. You need local government to really have the impact in the communities that you need to have, really. Otherwise, it's your loss.
There you are. A loss for everybody. So
everybody, that's it. It's everybody's loss, really.
Operation Clear the Road task force resumes and they continue. Now, the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy recently got together with stakeholders in the cybersecurity realm. And you think, why do we need that? We do need it, as this will tell you. Have a look and have a listen.
The ministry.
And I would like to thank as well the civil society. Everyone was really passionate, and they have all immensely contributed to the success of the program. Cyber security is indeed something that we all need to look into, because we've seen what's happening in the world now. People are being scammed. So many things are happening. Our CNIs have been attacked. And so many things are happening. Cyberspace is no more free for us to access freely, without fear. So I think what we have as civil society, and also in the cyber security domain, we have to continue on the awareness program. We have to me, I feel we have still not reached the level that we intend, because it's a very big country and we have lots of vulnerabilities that is happening, especially with young children, young women, girls.
In 2023, the Central Bank of the Gambia was also hit by the ransomware attack, which raised concerns about the security of the country's financial sector.
Colleague Jennifer Sonko getting in there. When I heard that gentleman speaking, it made me want to remember this phrase we use in Creole and kind of adapt it and say cyber security in our all man business. It's everybody's business, cyber security, because whether you're young, old, working or not working, we use electronic means of communication a lot more, and it means we are open to cyber security threats. And as we heard towards the tail end of that report, even the Central Bank of the Gambia was hacked. Famously or infamously. Mr. Mboj, it's everybody's business, surely.
Absolutely. That all businesses, all entities, really, will be sort of forming their defenses, as it were, be on the alert. It's just the nature of things now. It's just how life is like. So what are you going to do? Of course, you get the infrastructure. You're going to know how to combat these things. And awareness. This is really very important. And giving us useful information. should be having crusades, campaigns all over
about what to do,
what to expect, as it were. This is what we've seen, that the most common, as it were, crimes that people are committing, and what you can do to minimize, as it were, the opportunities. Of course, perhaps you cannot remove all risks, but what can you do to minimize, as it were, the opportunities for...
So they brought together kind of non-governmental actors who are in this space, which is good, because it has to be a collaborative effort. It's not just government that gets hacked. For example, private citizens can get their accounts and their details stolen and all sorts of things. So good that they brought them together and recognize the work that they're doing outside of government.
Absolutely. I mean, I would certainly expect that, particularly with private sector. We've certainly been very conscious about the security. The private sector, they'll be doing that. You know, I'm sure most of them they have taken certain steps,
software
and all of that for their security.
Specifically, that is their job, is to look
into that. That's it. So perhaps now one would worry about whether government as well, whether we've got the right structures in place to combat those things.
Yeah. So yes, as I said, it's everybody's business. Thank you for that. We've got 2 more stories to go, and somebody in the office said I should stop saying the penultimate story. I should say the second to last story. So for that person, here's the second to last story on tonight's program. And ECOMIC, the commander, there's recently been a change, one replacing the other. And here's what the outgoing one had to say.
Had 3 lines of efforts. The first one was about the readiness of the force. And the second one was on how to increase the coordination, the collaboration with the Gambian Defense and Security Force. And the third one was about the acceptance of the force, how to improve the acceptance of the force.
So 3 things, readiness of the force itself, the coordination with our own security sector, and then of course, the acceptance by the public, particularly because they're among us, and people are saying, "Why are they still here?" But they are here, and the new force commander has taken over, Mr. Mboj.
Absolutely. And when he said acceptance, I said,
in some communities, yes, quite.
But I think the Afrobarometer, I think they did.
That's right.
A survey on this.
That's right. At how whether people still want them here.
That's it. Quite. So the acceptance is a bit dodgy.
It might be referring
you haven't been vocal.
No, quite.
Really.
Quite. People aren't saying get them out.
That sort
you
of
have
thing.
the odd article or the odd posting online.
That sort of
that's
thing, but not en masse.
No.
We haven't done that yet. So this is it. Somebody else has taken over. So now, what would be their objectives? For how long?
Well, but that's the question that keeps coming up, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the story, because people are saying, okay, a new person has taken over, but nobody's ever given us a deadline on the kind of the end. This kind of mission creep. It seems as if they'll be here forever. I know they haven't been here forever, but they've been here long enough, as far as some people are concerned.
Yes, and they'll probably tell you that, well, for security reasons,
quite.
There are certain things we cannot share.
We hear that
as it were.
Yeah, quite.
So you just never know. But again, I don't know. Even the contributing countries could sooner or later say, look, it's enough, we want our troops back for whatever reason, because their generosity will depend on what's happening at home.
Of course.
Sometimes national priorities would mean that you may need to pull your troops for whatever reason.
Sure.
So we should be careful we don't leave ourselves,
And that could happen. I mean, if we go,
happen.
we've got one more story to go, but if we go back when Niger had the coup d'etat and Nigeria was thinking of contributing troops to, a possible invasion force, Nigerians came out in numbers, say, no, we don't. You don't send our boys there. That's not their job, Yeah.
So stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
quite.
whatever we're doing, we better step it up.
Yeah, quite.
To get our
our
reforms
together. Yeah,
in
quite.
place.
Together. Thank you for this, Mr. Amboge. And now the final story. U.S. President Roosevelt, 82 years ago, 13th of January, he paid the briefest of visits to the Gambia, but it's safe to say it left quite an impression on him. Have a look, have a listen.
Elliott, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Air Corps at the time, and who incidentally had been to the Gambia a year earlier on an army mapping project, was in Casablanca when his father arrived. He said his father kept him up until after midnight talking about what he saw in Bathurst. I'll bet I found out more in one afternoon in Bathurst than you were able to find out in 2 months, Roosevelt said to his son, and added, I must tell Churchill what I found out about his British Gambia today. President Roosevelt said everywhere he passed in Bathurst, he saw malnourished, sick people. The natives, he said, were just getting to work in rags and glum looking. The prevailing wage was 1 shilling 9 pence, less than 50 cents. Negro women in an odd assortment of clothing filed past, balancing 5-gallon jugs on their heads. Huts and hovels of thatch, mat and adobe, bulged with gangly, undernourished children.
He was both not impressed and he was impressed. Mr. Amboge, in the sense that it left quite an impression on him, and one that he carried on for several months after. I was tempted to write an article titled The Gambia's Contribution to the Formation of the United Nations, but that was one of the outcomes of it, wasn't it?
They wrote to Damascus
for him.
For him.
Yeah.
Yes, because that gave him the face.
Well, this
of
is
the
it.
misery of colonialism.
And I said to somebody, because they were saying, well, you know, how did it take him so long to come to the realization? I think because we live in an information age where information is accessible instantaneously, you know, something happens and we say, oh, you know, we're there. That wasn't the case then. You had to go there, you had to see it for yourself. And, he flew here, and what he saw really shocked him.
And reading about it doesn't quite cut it. Unless you're reading some great literary genius, who can really conjure up realities through words. So this was the key. In the abstract, because he was against imperialism.
Yeah, quite.
Roosevelt was genuinely against imperialism. That was why that was one source of tension, really, between himself and Churchill. Churchill was the arch advocate of imperialism.
Quite.
He said that the king didn't make him first minister for him to go and liquidate the British Empire. So that wasn't his job. So I wasn't interested in that. But here, once Roosevelt really saw, as it were, the misery of colonialism that hardened him in wanting to form the UN, then that also pushed him sort of to tell Britain and all the other allies that with the ending of the war, you're going to have to decolonize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
So that Gambia was quite pivotal in that it had that catalytic, catalytic galvanizing push, as it were, to make Roosevelt act and colonialism.
Yes, sure. And thank you for that, Mr. Amboge. And before I have to scream at the producer, thank you for your interjection so far. And to Lamindi Sonko, thank you for your interpretations. And to you, the viewer, thank you for watching until we come your way again next week. Goodbye.